Have you ever wondered why some property investors seem to build multi-million dollar portfolios while others never get past their first property, or worse still, sell up after a few years? Now, it's not about luck. It's not about earning six figures, and it's definitely not about being born into money. In my mind, the real reason most people don't get the financial independence they want is they're trapped by money myths. False beliefs about wealth, about investing, about financial security that sound logical, but quietly sabotage their success. Welcome to another episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, where I like to clarify many of the confusing messages about money, finance and property. And today I'm joined by Brett Warren, National Director of Metropol, to unpack 15 of these common money myths. We're going to have a look at them and what's holding many Australians back. So if you're serious about building financial freedom, this episode may challenge the way you think about money in some areas. It'll give you insights, and I hope it's going to help you move forward with confidence. So let's jump in and start busting those myths.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropol, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
Well, Brett, great to have you back on the show.
Thanks, Michael. Good to be with you. I know we've got a lot of myths to unpack, and I think the first one that comes to my mind is the fact that, people always say it takes money to make money, but despite what people believe, it doesn't really take a lot of money once you've kind of got the snowball rolling. And I know, for example, many Australians have equity in their homes that they can use to seed capital for investments, while others have to learn the discipline of saving. I think that's the hardest part, isn't it? Just saving the first bit to get started, because once you've got that equity and you're investing in those high growth opportunities, you can then actually use equity to fund your portfolio. And that doesn't actually take a lot of money at all, does it?
Well, it doesn't take it once you get in. Getting in is the hard bit, as you say. Now, again, we're talking about myths regarding investment, but a lot of people buy their home first. And I read an interesting statistic only a couple of days ago, Brett, that according to PEXA, which is the organisation that does all the electronic conveyancing, there was something like 720,000 property transactions in the last financial year, just gone. Separate statistics, the Australian Bureau of Statistics showed that there was 120,000 odd first home buyer loans. So of all those 720,000 transactions, about 16% were first home buyers. And getting your foot on the ladder is the important bit. Whether you start as a first home buyer or a rent investor, that's a little bit hard. But once you're in, it makes it easier. At the beginning of next year, the government's going to pour fuel on the fire of the property markets by making it even easier for first home buyers, Brett.
Well, they certainly will. And I think that's the key point, isn't it? It's just that hard part getting through. It is hard to get that first one, but once you've done that, it's just so much easier, as long as you're investing in the right kind of high growth opportunities.
I think that's the big thing, isn't it? Yes, because just buying any property doesn't work. Actually, it did in 2020, 21, 22, when before interest rates went up, when we had that money being given away in every property, even the worst main corner went up in value. But as we'll maybe talk about as we move on, and we've discussed it before, the market's moving to a different phase of the cycle, much more fragmented. You're right, the first myth is it takes money to make money. Maybe a corollary to that is some people will be saying something along the lines of, don't make enough money. But I agree with you. I think almost everybody does make enough, but you need, they're going to say, oh, he's an old fuddy-duddy, but you need discipline and you need delayed gratification. If you do the easy things now, you're going to have a harder time later. If you do the hard things now, you have an easy time later. But if you think about it, the average Australian, and only if it's a minimal income, 70, 80,000 a year for 30, 40 years, they're going to earn millions and millions of dollars over their lifetime, but at the end, they're not left with much.
No, that's right. And I think one of the things we talk about is not having an income problem, but actually having a spending problem. And by delaying that gratification, I think a lot of Tom Corley's work's good here too, Michael, in a sense that he's got that formula where he almost saves 10% of his wage. So as soon as something he gets paid, 10% of it goes into a separate account, and they just forget about it. So
the tax man does that to you, doesn't he?
So it's exactly the same, and it's a good formula to use. If you work that out, because then you can kind of enforce that saving. But again, you've got to be disciplined, because when all of a sudden there's $5,000 or $10,000 there, and the new jet ski comes on sale, you've got to have the ability to reject that and look at the bigger picture, don't you?
think it's harder for people nowadays. When I was growing up and first having to save and to get into the property market, um, I had to, well, I only had $1,000 deposit, but that was the equivalent of much, much more today. I went halves with my parents and the bank of mum and dad's helping a lot of people. But there weren't credit cards. You couldn't just buy online. The temptation is much greater nowadays. The marketers know how to get you. They know how to suck you in to buy online.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that I commonly get, Michael, the next myth is my job and superannuation will take care of my
Yeah.
financial future. I get that a fair bit, especially with super. I think the danger there at the moment is, I'm a fair way away from retirement yet. I'm probably another 15 or 20 years away. But I think by the time I get there, the government's already finding ways to tax things and change things as well. And I think, it's not going to be that case. I mean, the pension won't be around when I get there and things like that. So, having, I guess, accept the definition of financial freedom as having the passive income to retire and live comfortably without having to work, you're not going to be able to achieve that through your job or super. You're going to have to take control of your financial future by investing in some. You just can't put 5 or 10% aside and rely on your super. You can't save your way to wealth, can you?
No, you can't. How much do you have in super? This is a question I'm asking our viewers and listeners because most have no idea. It's sort of the money that's taken out before they see it. They don't know what's going on. A small percentage of people have a self-managed super fund. But I recently read that most people are going to retire with a superannuation of somewhere between $400,000 and $600,000. Unfortunately, females will have less because they've sometimes taken time off in the middle for maternity leave. That's in today's dollar value. But if you think about it, and that's all you had to retire on, your money's going to run out before your life will, we hope, because most people are retiring in their 60s and they're going to live another 25 years or so. And I agree with you. You can't count on the government being able to pay pensions, and they're probably going to attack super in some ways. So you're right. That's a myth. Take control, be in control. Don't be a passenger being driven along by the system. Be the pilot of your life. Drive your car.
Yeah, well
I
said.
think another myth that people are saying is, I'm not smart enough. I don't understand this financial system. What would you say to them, Brett, if they come along to you as a client of Metropole and say, what do I do? I don't even know where to start.
Well, I think there's something you always say, Michael. If you're the smartest person in your team, you're in trouble. But the other thing is, there's actually enough people out there today that can actually assist you, and you've got to find the right person and use their knowledge and their experience. And I know that's what we do with our team.
Yeah. So successful people, we look after many, many clients at Metropole, and they come from all walks of life. Some have got university degrees, some are professionals, but the average ones aren't. And I see it because I get the messages of all the new clients who come into the system. A landscaper yesterday bought a great property, people who are employees. And of course, there are also self-employed people, and education doesn't promote your financial fortune. I've read that Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, they didn't finish school.
Yeah.
The truth is, in Australia compared to other countries, we're so lucky that we live here and most of our listeners do. The truth is you can do whatever you want, and not being smart enough, that's just another excuse. There will always be excuses. There'll always be uncertainty out there. You're not allowed to use that as an excuse.
No, that's right. I can imagine back in your day, it would have been incredibly difficult to find information readily available and things like that. I mean, there's really no excuse today. I mean, you can
The
really
first
find
book
things.
I read is still on my bookshelf there, but it was an American book, and there was one or two Australian books by a couple of Australian people. Jan Summers was the first one whose book was widely promoted, but I was already in property for 10 years or so by then. There wasn't the internet. I guess that's the other way around now, Brett, that in fact there's probably too much information. And with AI, my emails are being cluttered with virtually, I can pick now. It's not difficult to look like an expert in property now with AI, but you've got to go past that and you've got to look into the depth of it.
I think you made a really good point there about having too many options and too many opportunities in front of you. And that's probably the next myth, Michael, I'd like to talk about is
Actually, can I interrupt you for a sec?
Yeah, sure.
Because I read an interesting story yesterday that I'd like to share today. Now, it just came to me because of AI and because everybody is now an expert. This is a story I read a while ago, but there was this expert, this professor who was doing a speaking tour around America, and he had a chauffeur who drove him around. And what he did was the chauffeur sat at the back of the room. He heard the speech, and he said one day to the professor, mate, can I please pretend I'm you? These people don't know me. It was a small country town. Can I please present your speech? I think I know it off by heart. And interestingly, he did. And the audience thought it was fantastic. until the first person asked him a question. And then he knew the speech, the sofa speech, but he didn't know how to answer the question. So what he said, and this is a story, whether it was true or not, I don't know. He said, "Oh, look, my chauffeur's sitting at the back. He's there with the cap on." That was what the professor was. He was pretending. And he said, "Such a simple question. I'll let my chauffeur answer it."
Very
So
clever.
I guess what I'm saying is at the moment, there are a lot of chauffeur speeches being produced by AI rather than professor speeches with depth. So yes, you're right, get a team around you, but be careful who you listen to.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? I can't even tell the difference between AI sometimes, articles and videos.
Yes,
It's
yeah, sure.
incredible. And I
Yeah.
guess that's the next myth we're talking about, why investing is so complicated. And I think at the moment it is because there's so many different options out there. But I guess it's only as complicated as you make it, isn't it? And you've got to see it like a game. And you've got to understand the rules of the game. You've got to get the knowledge to become financially independent. There's many new changes. There's taxes each year. Things add different as well, and rules change. But you've got to be able to adapt to that. And investing's no different. It's probably easier than ever before. And I often hear you say it's a simple process, but it's not easy. And that's a really, really key point.
It's not a play on words. So there are hundreds of things you could know, but there's probably only 3 or 4 basic principles you should know, and then there are permutations on that. So residential real estate's a high growth, relatively low yield investment. People try to bastardize that and chase cash flow or chase hotspots. So the property you eventually buy has got to be the physical manifestation of a whole lot of decisions you make and make in the right order. So you can't just go off and buy it. Property investments a process, not an event. There's a number of other basic premises that you need to understand, and then the rest, get the right people around you, Brett. But I think some people, another myth, maybe it's not a myth, is that investment's risky. And I guess the definition of investment is to commit money or capital in order to get a financial return. Risk isn't part of the definition of investment, but many beginning investors, well, they think they're investing, but they speculate. They buy a property in a secondary location, they buy off the plan. This area hasn't done well for a while, so it's going to increase. It's difficult to know which of those are risky and which of those are speculation and which is actually grounded on evidence and fact. So we are currently recommending to a lot of our clients to invest in Melbourne because it hasn't done well for a long time. But that's not the reason we are saying to invest. It's the next hotspot. We're talking about the underlying fundamentals, not because it hasn't done well, even though that's another addition to say you're buying below replacement cost. But you've got to understand that investment can be risky if you get it wrong. But if you find the right property with an element of scarcity, there'll always be strong demand. And in my mind, in property, it's not hard to outperform the averages, while I personally can't do that in shares or other investment commodities.
No, and I think that's the good thing about property, and particularly the strategy that we recommend. It's a long-term strategy, so we never ever recommend. I mean, no one knows what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years, but we can always guarantee within, if you're investing for a decade or more, and you've got the right area, the right location, and
Yep.
some of the other
Yep.
fundamentals we look at, you're going to do exceptionally well, and that kind of removes a lot of that risk, doesn't it?
It does. Buying the right asset will remove the risk in many ways. What is the right asset? Boy, we've spoken about it every week in this show. We're not going into that today. Today, we're just talking about the myths. And the reason we're doing this when we sat down to have a talk about what we should discuss is because we're wanting our listeners and our viewers to say, hey, which of those have I thought about? Which of those are holding me back? Because currently there's a window of opportunity. Interest rates are falling. Confidence is coming back month after month. All around Australia, property values are increasing, but some people are still being held back because they're concerned about some of these myths. And one of
Yeah.
them is, hey, I don't even know how to time the market. Is now a good time? It's often said that timing's everything in investment, but I don't think that's the case. Look, by the way, when I first started investing, I thought that was the case. I read the concept of counter-cyclical investing. I'm saying read because there weren't podcasts and there wasn't YouTube. And I thought, yeah, that makes sense. If you invest when nobody else does, if you invest when everybody else is fearful and be fearful when others are greedy, it'll be okay. And sure, timing does matter. You don't want to buy right near the peak of the boom. But I've actually found successful investors, it doesn't matter to them. I've noticed some people do well in good times just as well as they do in bad times. And there are other investors who do poorly in good times and even worse in bad times. So successful investors know how to create wealth at any point in the cycle, while unsuccessful investors, we've unfortunately found, manage to lose money at the same stages of the cycle. And that suggests to me it's actually not the external world.
Yeah.
that determines whether you make money or not. It's inside. And that's why in your head, it's the mindset. That's why we spend time talking about that. That's why in every show I have a mindset moment. So it's maybe these myths that are holding some people back, Brett.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think we talked a little bit before about holding these assets for decades. Whether you're going to invest now or whether you're going to invest later in the year or early next year, in 20 years' time, it's actually probably not going to matter, is it?
No,
It's the fact
no.
that you've actually got yourself in a position and you've actually taken action and had that comfortable. I think if you've got that plan in place, you've got the fundamentals, you understand what you're doing. It actually takes a lot of the risk out, but you're obviously more inclined to take action.
That makes sense. Okay, so some people, another myth is, oh, the rich are lucky.
Yeah.
Oh, the baby boomers, they got in when it was easy. The truth is that success and wealth creation is no more about luck than anything else in life. Yeah, we are lucky. People watching, listening to this were actually born or have migrated to Australia, the best country in the world, at a time of great opportunity. So already you've won the lottery, as the Ovarian lottery, as Warren Buffett would say.
Yeah.
So you've already got your luck on the side. But I think it actually has a lot to do with mindset and also just becoming in control with your finances. Look, we've spoken about the analogy of Monopoly in previous podcasts. I used to play it as a kid. Sometimes I won, sometimes I lost. As an adult, I'm playing Monopoly a bit with. Actually, I remember a couple of years ago, I played it with a financially intelligent person, somebody who was actually a finance broker who we were using at the time. I haven't seen him for a few years now. Contrary to what I thought as a kid, it's not a game of luck. Monopoly is a game of strategy. You've got to get the right spots on the board to get the best returns. And you then can acquire monopolies and collect higher
Yeah.
rents. And those are the people who've learned how to negotiate to get the best deals. They learned how to take the luck out of monopoly and consistently win. And I think it's really much the same in the real world, Brett.
Yeah, particularly in property investing and having that ability. Michael, I remember sitting
If
with
you
a client.
count on luck, you're not going to get there.
No, exactly. I was sitting with a client a couple of days ago, and then they was saying we're doing a property review, talking about how their properties performed. They purchased just before COVID, and one of the words that came out of their mouth was, "Oh, I think we were just lucky to get in that spot and lucky to do this." And there was actually no luck about it. I actually had to stop the client and say, "Hang on a minute, let's go back to when you purchased this property, because when you purchased this property, you were getting told that your property, the market was going to crash 40%, COVID is going to ruin the economy, blah 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 blah." So you had to be brave to do that. You actually had to take a step forward, but you actually had to have a plan. You actually had some confidence and conviction to invest. So there was no luck about it. And then the market obviously, grew in value. I mean, their properties doubled in value. They paid 550, 600 for a property is now worth 1.2 million. They kind of felt they were lucky, but they didn't, because they just followed a process. And whether that had happened in the 5 years or the 10 years, it didn't matter. The system and the procedures were there. It wasn't about luck.
Good point. Brett, another myth that I know many financial planners propagate, and there seems intuitively to be some sense to it, is you must diversify. But in my mind, that's wrong. I know that's, as I said, what financial planners suggest, but that leads to averageness, to average outcomes. I found successful investors don't diversify. They cultivate skills required to make better, smarter deals, decisions, and they specialize. I diversify. I've got residential, I've got industrial, I've got retail, I've got commercial, and in a number of states, but I stick to residential real estate in particular. And you know my portfolio, it's in 3 or 4 municipalities, and I don't mind buying again in those same municipalities because they've always outperformed. So wide diversification is required if you don't understand what you're doing, Brett.
Yeah, definitely. I think, particularly if you're getting started, Michael, I don't diversify either. I mean, I'm getting to a point now where I am, but when you're kind of starting your portfolio, you've only got limited funds, when you're
Yes.
looking to invest. So you've got this choice between shares, property, and everything else out there, Bitcoin, whatever else. I think the reason I chose property is because of a couple of reasons. If I had a $50,000 deposit, I could buy a $500,000 property. I couldn't do that with shares. I couldn't do that with anything else. Bitcoin wasn't around back then, and it was probably too speculative for my liking. But also the ability that I've done is actually to manufacture growth. I've done developments, I've done renovations, to do those kind of things as well. And now that's got to me a point where my asset base is significantly wider than if I just diversified and put money into shares and stuff. And now I can actually regroup and start diversifying. And I also add shares in my super and things. And so that was a form of diversification as well.
Having said that, Brett, once you build a substantial asset base, part of Metropol's strategy is to start off putting a plan together for you to help you plan to become the person you plan to become, and then regularly reviewing it. And the first step is educating yourself. The next stage of your property journey is to increase your asset base, and then you slowly transition by lowering your loan to value ratios. And when you eventually need to live off your portfolio, you really probably, unless you've got a very substantial residential portfolio, do need other
Mm.
asset classes, whether they're shares, whether they're bonds, whether they're ETFs, whether it's commercial property. So I believe diversification does have a role, but at the right stage.
Yeah.
So it's where you are in your journey. If you're at the asset growth stage of your journey, in my mind, protecting yourself with the right assets is more important than diversifying. And I
Yeah.
know that some people say, I got $1 million, I'll buy two $500,000 properties or three regional properties. I don't think that's the answer. I believe it's more important to own investment grade properties, and it's unlikely you're going to get them at those lower price points. Interestingly, I've been very impressed with some of the properties our buyers agents have bought at prices still that would surprise some people, because I know
Yeah.
some people think, I'm not going to get Metropole because they only buy high-end, very expensive properties. And the answer is we do. But we also, there's been some great apartment purchases in Sydney at price points that still surprise me, Brett.
Yeah, especially for Sydney. And the thing is, the prices haven't gone up as well as houses in Sydney. The gap's the biggest there's ever been, but rents have been rising. So there's some really good rental yields out there. And unlike Brisbane and Melbourne, there's probably less land tax to pay, higher rent. So the holding costs are significantly less. And you're still getting into a waterside kind of suburb for an apartment. So absolutely, I think there's some great opportunities there at the moment. And I don't think they're going to last long, Michael, because as we've
No,
spoken
no.
about, there's a few things happening at the moment with interest rates, and the first home buyer grants will kick in and things like that as well.
So we're going to go on with some more myths in a moment, but
Yeah.
if you'd like to take advantage of this stage of the property cycle, we still genuinely see a window of opportunity, because interest rates are going to keep falling further. Confidence is going to come back. The media is going to keep discussing how property values go up month after month, and the cycle is going to move on. I don't see a boom because affordability will create issues for some people, but I see the beginning of a prolonged period of a number of years of capital growth. Yes, it would have been better to get in 6 months ago, 12 months ago, 2 years ago. But if you're keen to get into property and understand what your options are and how to take advantage of what's currently happening in the cycle, I'll leave a link in the show note. Just go to metropole.com.au and have a chat with one of our wealth strategists. It's an obligation-free chat where we'll understand where you are, what you're wanting to achieve. Are your goals realistic? And we'll show you how together we can put a plan together to help you achieve those goals. What you got to do, but what you shouldn't be doing as well, what to avoid. So metropole.com.au. Now, another myth that people come up with that stops some people, and we've seen it, is I've got to pay off my home first. And I know that because that's what my parents taught me: get a good job, get a good education, buy a home, pay it off. I guess they see it as a level of security, but it doesn't make financial sense, does it?
It absolutely doesn't, particularly in this new financial era. I think paying down your home is important. Especially younger people. I mean, it may not even be their forever home, so I don't know why they focus so much on paying it off. But I think if you can leverage that into another property, it can make a considerable difference. I know I've done a lot of exercises and case studies on that before, Michael. I've got a friend who wants to invest and has asked me about investing, but they want to pay their home loan off first. And we've been talking about this for probably 5 years, and they've probably knocked off 100 grand in their home over the last 5 years. But if they had just left the home loan as it was and invested in a property, they probably would have made 5 or 10 times that amount. So you've got to have a strategy. You've got to understand the strategy behind it, and it's important to do that. But certainly, at the moment, I think it's not the right thing to do.
Well, it's idle equity sitting there that you could use as the deposit to buy an investment property and grow your wealth, because your home's still going to increase in value. Yeah, your mortgage is going to stay the same, but with inflation, and we've got lower inflation, but it's still there, the mortgage isn't going to be worth as much, so to speak, in 10 years' time, but you'll have two properties or three increasing in value. Now, Brett, I know some people are complaining it's too late. All the good investments are taken.
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
Oh, definitely not. I actually get people asking me, well, why would I go with you guys? You guys would take all the good deals. And I said, if I bought another property home, my wife would probably divorce me because, you can only buy so many opportunities and so many deals. And look, there's opportunities in every market, but, we only want to find those needle in a haystack. So it's actually quite hard to find. But look, there's definitely opportunities out there, and always looking for those kinds of opportunities are important. Sometimes there's a lot in the market. This time of year there's not, because there's not a lot of stock on the market and things like that. Others kind of create those opportunities by understanding the markets as well, and understanding the timing of the market, the type of properties as well. And we talked a little bit about Sydney, and we talked a little bit about Melbourne also. Making sure that you understand those market cycles and timings is probably more important as well.
I think all of yesterday's good opportunities are taken.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's going to be new ones coming on the market tomorrow and next week and the week after. So there will always be opportunities. And yes, who wouldn't have liked to buy the home their parents bought at the price they paid? But why don't you move yourself forward 25, 30 years and see what your kids will say about how did you afford to buy that home or that investment property years ago? I would have liked to do that then.
Yeah. Michael, the next one is the next myth we talk about is obviously, wanting to do it right and wanting to have to do it yourself. There's no such thing as a self-made millionaire, I guess, but I know we see this with a lot of successful professionals, right? They're successful
Yes,
in their field. They're professional.
yes,
They've
yes.
hard work. They've done everything themselves, and they think, oh, we can get this property thing right, and we can do all that ourselves, can't we?
You're right. And we've often said on your own you can run faster, but together you can run further. It doesn't mean you should hand over full responsibility for your wealth creation to others. In fact, you shouldn't. You've got to be careful, because only again yesterday in the paper, I read about an organization that I didn't know, I hadn't heard of, but they're a property organization that was putting together deals and developments, and they lost $120 million. KPMG, or I think it was the receiver. It was in the news, and all the investors in there had lost money. So they were, again, they weren't investing, they were speculating, because they were
Mm.
putting money into construction deals, helping support them. There was another big company that went broke, similarly doing that a year or so ago as well. So don't hand over full responsibility. The rich recognize they can't be an expert, though, in all elements of wealth creation. So they find a team of experts. And at Metropole, we're much more than just another buyer's agent. We help our clients safely grow, protect, and pass on their wealth, because we've got a wealth advisory division. We've got a renovations and construction division if people need that. We look after property management. We have an affiliation with a number of very good finance strategists to help them get their finance right. We help people buy their homes, their investments, and even commercial properties. So you don't have to do it on your own. And in fact, you shouldn't. And even our most wealthy and successful clients, Brett,
Mm.
they still find benefit in working with us, even though they could do it on their own. They just know together we can get better results.
Well, especially, I mean, they're so time poor as well, aren't they? And sometimes
Yeah.
they probably lower their standards to compromise and get something done rather than, being patient. And quite often that's what we do. They're paying us to be patient and to find the right opportunity and not rush into things. So I think it's incredibly important.
Sure. So what would you say to a client who came to you, or prospect who came to you and said, oh, look, it's too late. I've tried. I've lost out. I've messed up. I've done everything wrong. It's too late.
Well, look, unless they're in their 60s and 70s, we might have a bit of a discussion. But look, I think one of the most heartbreaking things you ever told me, Michael, was that it takes 30 years to become financially independent. But then when you readjusted that and said, look, it's because the first 10 years everybody does everything wrong. So you're
Yeah.
not alone. The first thing I'd say is you're not alone. We've all made mistakes. We all do things wrong. But most people have got time to get it right. That's the thing. The bad news is they can't afford to mess it up again, but they've
Yes.
got time to get it right. So there's so many successful stories of people who have done that. Look at Ray Kroc from McDonald's, and you've heard of Colonel Sanders and things. But even our
Yes.
clients,
Yes.
we've had clients in their 50s that are now financially independent, and they came to us, having wasted and probably made poor decisions in the first 20 years of their investment journey, and now they're set up and they're in a fantastic position. So I don't think it is too late if that's the case.
But as you said, you can't afford to get it wrong. You don't have the luxury of time.
Yeah.
Okay. I know some people are held back by, maybe this is one of the biggest myths, that debt is bad. They
Mm.
see it as a dirty word. In my mind, not all debt is bad. There's good debt against appreciating assets, investments. There's necessary debt, the debt against your home, and there's bad debt, which is credit card or other debt against appreciating assets. So in my mind, savvy investors know how to use good debt, they use leverage. And the only way you can leverage is by using a small amount of your effort to do bigger results, and that's leveraging money. It's actually leveraging expertise by having other people help you. So you coordinate it and you get people around you. They use leverage and leveraging their knowledge, but also leveraging money. So in my mind, investment debt or invest against good investments isn't a bad thing, but it worries a lot of people, don't they? I guess it's
Yeah.
ingrained.
It is, it is. And, if you told someone, in 10, 15 years' time, you're going to be $5 million in debt, they wouldn't want to do it. But if you told them you had a $10 million property portfolio, then it's kind of a different story. You've got to make sure you control that. You can't be, having, 10% loan to value ratios. You want to keep your loan to value ratio comfortable. And control that debt and having the ability to pay it. And I think you often say, debt's only a bad thing if you can't actually pay the debt and afford to pay the debts. As long as you've got a strategy and a way to do that, and you've also got a backup, Michael, you've also got a buffer, because there are going to be times where you can't afford it. So you've got to
Yes.
have that buffer in place as well. And if you can manage those things and reduce risk, then, debt isn't bad.
Now, that's a really good point, because having a buffer gives you security. Now, a couple of months ago or weeks ago, we recorded an episode of the Michael Yardney podcast about financial buffers. So if you're watching this or listening to this, and you haven't heard that discussion where Brett went into great detail about the secret that so many investors, successful investors, have, and that's having a financial buffer, go back to wherever you're listening to this podcast. Hey, finish this one first and subscribe if you don't currently subscribe to the show, and then have a listen to Brett's thoughts about the importance of financial buffers. I said in the introduction, Brett, we're going to have 15 myths, so I've got to come up with one more. And maybe the last one would be, oh, look, it doesn't matter what I want, I just can't do it. What would you say to somebody who comes in there and sort of says, no, it's not for me?
What does Henry Ford say, Michael? If you think you can, you're right. If you think you can't, you're also right. So
Well said.
it's a guarantee of failure, because our beliefs and perceptions obviously become our realities. Again, getting back to that mindset shift's important. And some people who have failed attempts learn that wealth is beyond their control, and they can't affect the outcome. They remain a victim. And we talked about the society and the government and the games that we've kind of got to play to be part of that. And that's obviously one reason also, Michael, why the rich get richer, because they believe they can control their destiny. They
Yes.
learn, they overcome these obstacles, they find a way, which is important. And I know one of the most interesting podcasts you've written, Michael, was about the ants and about how they just seem to find a way to get over obstacles and around obstacles and under obstacles.
Yes, have the ant philosophy. That was Jim Rowan's thing. Ants don't stop, do they?
No, they don't. So, having the belief that you can control where you want to be and finding a way to do that, I think is incredibly important.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed our chat today.
Yeah.
I always do, offline as well as online. But I hope we got the message across to the viewers and listeners that the road to financial freedom isn't about luck, and you don't need a high income, and you don't need to be the smartest person in the room. Sure, all of those help, but there's no way money knows who's in control, what their qualifications are, what their ambitions are, what they're going to do with it. Money is there to be used, to be spent, to be saved, to be invested. It can't judge whether you're worthy or not. So all those excuses, don't use them. Now that you understand some of these myths that have held others back, have a think about, any of those hold you back? Because the answer is you can do things differently. Choose to change your beliefs to produce fantastic results. And investing, as Brett said, may be simple, but it's not easy. And that's why we know that around 20% of those who get involved in property investment sell up in the first year. And about 50%, half of people, sell up in the first 5 years. But a recent survey of the results of our clients at Metropole showed they're 7.3 times more likely than an average investor to own 6 or more properties. I guess they've made the right decisions because they got the right advice. And if you would like to work with our team, go to metropole.com.au and have a complimentary wealth discovery chat just to understand how we could, if possible, work together. Because if you do things like those successful investors do, and we're going to help you with the same frameworks and the same strategies that we've helped them, you could also join the ranks of successful property investors. Go to metropole.com.au. Thanks for your time, Brett. Look forward to catching up with you again next week for the show.
Thanks, Michael. People often want to know where to start with these kinds of things. Well, the first time to start is really just to have a chat with someone and find things out. So it's a great opportunity. So good to be with you and great to unpack some of those myths.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks.
As a way of having a bit of fun in these podcasts, I've introduced a while ago a weekly property trivia question, or one for each show actually, where you, my listeners and viewers, have the opportunity to win a hard copy of one of my best-selling books, Michael Yardney's Guide to Investing. Every week we give away 3 of these, and thank you for the nice comments you're leaving when you leave your answers. So I'm going to ask you a question in a moment. Go to propertytrivia.com.au and enter your answer and have a chance to win a hard copy, a real book. By the way, everyone gets a prize of a special report I've updated. And don't worry if you've listened to a slightly older episode, your entry still counts. So here's this week's question. By the way, simple, true or false? Property prices in Australia have doubled roughly every 10 years for the last 50 years. Now, it's not uniform around Australia, but if we're looking at big picture, true or false, property prices in Australia have doubled roughly every 10 years over the last 50 years. Go to propertytrivia.com.au, leave your answer, and you'll get a report, something that'll give you useful information, and a chance to win a hard copy of Michael Yardney's Guide to Investing.
Now here's Michael's mindset message. Remember, a change in your thinking will lead to a change in your life.
In today's mindset message, let me ask you a question that might change everything for you, but may also make it a little bit uncomfortable. What would you ask for if you weren't afraid of hearing the word no? Recently, I came across a story that I found very interesting. When Steve Jobs was just 12 years old, he picked up the phone and called Bill Hewitt. You may remember there was Hewlett-Packard, a big computer company, one of the early ones, and he asked Bill Hewitt, he asked him for spare parts for a computer project he was building. Now, think about this. A kid, barely a teenager, had the guts to call a tech industry giant and ask for help. And do you know what happened? Bill just didn't send the parts. He offered young Steve a summer job. That one bold request helped shape the future of technology as we know it. Later in life, Steve Jobs reflected on this moment and said something that I found insightful. He said, most people will never pick up the phone and call. Most people never ask. And that's what separates people who do things from the people who dream about them. Let's be honest, many of life's doors stay closed, not because we were turned away, but because we never even knocked. We don't ask. We assume we're going to be rejected. We tell ourselves stories like, oh, I'm not ready. They won't help me. It's not the right time. But here's the truth. Closed mouths don't get fed. You might be just one ask away from a mentor, a deal, a collaboration, a breakthrough in your business or investment. So here's the challenge for today. What conversations have you been avoiding? What opportunity could you unlock if you had the courage to ask? Who could help you? If only you had the guts to reach out. So my mindset message for today is really to remind you that rejection may sting for a moment, but regrets live for a lifetime. And sometimes the only thing standing between you and your next big opportunity is simply asking for it. So again, I'll leave you with this. What would you ask for if you weren't afraid to hear the answer no? Now go on, do your homework, and then ask. Thank you for spending the last little while with me. I hope you got some benefit from this show. But before you move on to the next podcast you're going to listen to, let me remind you I have another show that I produce once a week with leading demographer Simon Kirstenmacher. We call that Demographics Decoded, where Simon and I unveil the trends that are going to shape your future. In my mind, this is a must-listen-to podcast for anyone interested in property investment, but also for business people and entrepreneurs. So if you don't currently subscribe to Demographics Decoded, just please stop for a second and subscribe on your podcast app where you're listening to this or on YouTube. And of course, if you don't subscribe to this show, the Michael Yardney Podcast, why not click the link that says follow or subscribe wherever you're listening right now. So twice a week, you're going to get benefit from my guests and me. And I'd like to ask you a little favour, please. If you did enjoy today's show and you know somebody who would also benefit, please tell them about the Michael Yardney Podcast and Demographics Decoded. There's a share button on every podcast app. On Apple Podcast, there are 3 little buttons at the top of the player. Well, just tell them about it. Just have a chat with them. Now, I hope you're going to be doing them a favour, and you're definitely going to be doing me a favour in my quest to help as many people as possible to become financially literate. And by the way, I've got a special bonus for you as my way of saying thank you for subscribing. Just go to podcastbonus.com.au. There'll be a link in the show notes, podcastbonus.com.au, where I've got a bunch of ebooks and reports. It's just my way of saying thank you for taking the time to listen. And remember, the information that we give you in this podcast is general information, not specific information about your personal circumstances, because we don't know about them. But if you do want specific information, you can always have a chat with my team at Metropole. Go to metropole.com.au. If you really want to learn more, you can always listen to the previous podcast, the many episodes we've already published. Just go back to the old episodes, which each have lessons about property investment, success, and money. Once again, thanks for listening to today's show.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?